My name is Penelope, not Garcia, babe, but Penelope, Grrracia. We're digging into one of the most bizarre cases I've ever downloaded into my mind. The disappearance of Steven Stayner.
But don't blink, because what starts like a miracle ends in nightmare. You ready?
So who was Steven Stayner? Stephen Gregory Stayner was born April 18th, 1965 in Merced, California, to Delbert and Kay Stayner. One big brother, 3 sisters, one quiet little life, until December 4th, 1972. 7-year-old Stephen was walking home from school when a stranger approached. A man, Vin Edward Murphy, said he was a church representative collecting donations. Stephen, sweet, trusting Stephen, said his mom might be willing to give something. That's when the white Buick rolled up. He got in, and that was the start of a nightmare. They drove him to a cabin in Cathy's Valley, just 30 minutes from home, so close it was near his grandfather's house. His family had no idea. Now let's be very clear, Murphy wasn't the real monster. That would be Kenneth Eugene Parnell. Troubled childhood, prison record, deep rot in the soul. His dad walked out. He turned to crime, arson, car theft, juvenile detention. But that was just his warm-up act. At 4 years old, he tried to rip out his own teeth with his fingers. By age 8 or 9, he shot himself in the stomach, then jumped off a barn, onto a plank covered in nails. That's not just trauma, that's masochism. And when he turned 20, Kenneth lured an 8-year-old boy by flashing a fake deputy badge. He SA'd that boy, got 4 years in prison, escaped, got caught again. This man was not sick. He was designed to harm. Murphy met Parnell while working at a resort near Yosemite. They were co-workers. Kenneth was a night janitor, of course, perfect for a predator. And what did Kenneth do? He brainwashed Murphy, talked him into abducting a child so he could raise him in a religious household, because nothing screams Jesus like felony kidnapping. Murphy was described as naive, trusting, and simple-minded. If someone called me that, I'd file a lawsuit for personality defamation. But Kenneth? He saw an easy puppet, and it was Kenneth driving that white Buick. His car, his cabin, his plan. And on the very first night, Stephen was SA'd. 2 weeks later, it became regular. This little boy, just 7, was told that his parents didn't want him, that they'd signed him away, that he now belonged to Kenneth. And Stephen believed it. He just wanted to go home, but instead he was told home didn't want him anymore. The second night, they said they'd called my parents again and told them it was okay for me to stay another night. Then one of them left and came back saying they'd gone to court and gotten custody, said I was his now. That's how it started. Eventually, Kenneth gave Stephen a new name, Dennis Gregory Parnell. He enrolled him in school, actually in several different schools, all while keeping him hidden in plain sight. It was all part of a disguise, a carefully maintained illusion, and it worked. They moved often across California. Kenneth took on odd jobs and frequently left Stephen alone for long hours. He allowed him to do things no child should be allowed to do. To drink, to roam freely, to come and go. But Stephen always came back. Because where could he go? Who would believe him? What does a child do when the only person offering any kind of affection is also the one keeping him from the world? And then came another layer to the story. A woman named Barbara Mathias lived with them for over a year. She later claimed she didn't know Stephen wasn't Kenneth's real son. Claimed she thought they were just a regular father and son. Really, Barbara? Stephen would later share that Kenneth once asked Barbara to assist in taking another boy in 1975 near the Santa Rosa Boys Club. The attempt failed, but it raises questions about how much Barbara truly didn't see. She lived there. She saw Stephen. She witnessed the fear, the tension, the silence. She knew. Stephen began calling Kenneth Dad within a week. Why? Because he was told his real parents didn't want him anymore. He believed he had been legally given away, and that belief, that lie, was the deepest trap. For 7 years, Steven was kept in a reality that wasn't his own. And then he grew older, and Kenneth's attention faded. When Steven entered his teenage years, Kenneth decided he wanted another child. And unbelievably, he tried to involve Steven in this plan, as if this were some kind of cycle. But Steven resisted every time. This boy with unimaginable strength refused to let another child experience what he had, until one day Kenneth acted anyway. In February 1980, with the help of an acquaintance, he took a 5-year-old boy named Timothy White from Ukiah, California. That was it. That was the final straw. On March 1st, while Kenneth was at work, Steven made a brave decision. He took Timmy's hand, and they ran. They hitchhiked into town. Steven tried to find Timothy's home, but couldn't. So he walked into a police station, and when the officer asked who he was, he gave a simple, unforgettable answer. "I know my first name is Steven." That sentence echoed across the country. It became the title of a book, a movie, a moment in history. 7 years after disappearing, Steven Stayner returned, not just for himself, but carrying the hope of another child. The next day, on March 2nd, Kenneth Parnell was arrested at his job. Both Steven and Timothy were reunited with their families. But what happened next shocked the public. Kenneth received only a 7-year sentence and was released after five years. Because of legal technicalities between counties, many serious charges were never brought to trial. That's how the system worked. As for Irvin Murphy and Randall Porman, they were found guilty of lesser charges. Steven even told investigators that Irvin had been kind to him in the beginning and believed Irvin had been manipulated too. That raises a hard question. When someone helps a person do something wrong under pressure, are they also a victim? But this story isn't just about what was taken. It's about what Steven gave. Steven Stayner endured years of silence, of confusion, of fear, and yet he came back, stronger, and he brought someone with him. The car pulled up, and I got in. They passed the street I lived on. I told them, "That's my road." They said, "We'll call your parents, you can stay the night." "Were you afraid?" a reporter asked. "Not that much," Steven replied. "Just a little. Just a little." The case exploded in the news. Media attention flooded their home. Steven and Timothy became overnight sensations. Steven did morning shows, press tours, interviews, all at 14 years old. After 7 years in the shadows, desperate for an escape, he finally had freedom. But the spotlight was its own kind of prison. On Good Morning America, he was asked if he recognized his parents, his siblings, while his lawyer sat nearby. Imagine that. A camera in your face, a stranger beside you, and your entire past being dissected in front of millions. Coming home wasn't easy. Steven had been an only child for 7 years. Now, he was sharing a room with his older brother, Carrie. And let's just say, Carrie didn't love it. Look in the background of those first interviews. Carrie's wearing a baseball cap. No smile, no warmth. Steven was also ostracized at school. Not just because of the cameras, but because people knew. They knew he'd been violated. They whispered, laughed, questioned his masculinity. They asked if he'd enjoyed it. Cruelty isn't always physical. Sometimes it's a glance, a giggle, a word in the hallway. It was too much. Steven dropped out of high school, started drinking. He clashed with his father, who, according to Steven, stopped hugging him after the cameras left. In an interview with Newsweek, Steven said, "I returned almost a grown man. And yet my parents saw me at first as their 7-year-old. After they stopped trying to teach me the fundamentals all over again, it got better. But why doesn't my dad hug me anymore?" 7 years changed him too? My God. It's enough to break anyone. But Steven kept going, despite the trauma, despite the spotlight, despite the silence in his own home. In 1985, at age 20, Steven married Jody Edmondson, who was 17 at the time. They had 2 children, Steven Jr. and Ashley. Steven settled back into Merced, California, the same town where he'd been abducted. He worked at a pizza shop just trying to live. Quietly, normally, and on the side. He helped a child abduction organization. Yep. The boy who had been stolen was now helping to find others. Try and tell me this man wasn't a literal saint. But on September 16th, 1989, just when life was starting to look like it might stay still for once, Steven's motorcycle collided with a car on his way home from work. The impact killed him almost instantly. The Stayner family lost a son again. Only this time, it wasn't just two grieving parents. It was a wife who lost her husband and two small children who lost their dad. Before his death, a two-part miniseries titled I Know My First Name is Steven was released, chronicling his story from the day he vanished to the day he walked into that police station holding Timmy White's hand. The miniseries was followed by a book of the same name, written by Mike Eccles. And all of this media coverage turned Steven's life, his trauma, his triumph, into legend. But Merced wanted to go even further. In 2010, the city unveiled a bronze statue of Steven. It shows him holding Timmy's hand, leading the little boy away from a cabin. It's haunting, beautiful, a tribute to a boy who survived hell and chose to save someone else on the way out. But that statue? It immortalizes more than just Steven's heroism. It also casts a very long shadow. Because while the world mourned Steven and honored his legacy, there was someone in the background, watching, boiling, being forgotten. His name was Cary Stayner, Steven's older brother, and he wasn't just living in Steven's shadow, he was being erased by it. At the time Steven vanished, Cary was 11, and like any big brother, he blamed himself. He was haunted, guilt-ridden, and when Steven came back, you'd think that would bring closure, right? Wrong. Cary became invisible, overshadowed. His pain, ignored, his talents, overlooked. The family's energy, understandably, had gone into finding Steven. And when Steven came home, that energy shifted to managing the chaos, the interviews, the media, the trauma. Cary, meanwhile, kept wishing on a star, literally. Every night he would walk several blocks from the house, pick a star in the sky, and wish for his brother to return. Even after Steven came home, he would forget and repeat the wish, and before suddenly remembering mid-prayer that Steven was home, then he'd thank the star instead. It sounds touching, but context matters. And that same boy who wished on stars would grow up to murder 4 women? Yeah. Plot twist. Cary Stayner became a serial killer. In February 1999, on what should have been a fun sightseeing trip to Yosemite, Carol Sund, her daughter Julie, and their friend Silvina Peloso disappeared. Weeks later, their charred rental car was found at the bottom of a cliff with 2 bodies in the trunk, and Julie, still missing. Then the FBI got a letter, a hand-drawn map, a chilling message. We had fun with this one. You see, after Steven's kidnapping, Cary's world never truly stabilized. His family imploded emotionally, their attention, understandably, locked on the missing boy. But their surviving son slipped through the cracks. He had creative gifts, talents. At Merced High School, Cary was even voted most creative. People thought he'd become an artist, a cartoonist. He played baseball too, left field. But behind the quiet exterior was a rage that had nowhere to go. His father, Delbert, swung between depression and obsession. His mother was lost in grief. Cary was just left behind. And like many unparented boys in deep emotional pain, he didn't disappear. He transformed. What started with a tragedy became a myth. What should have ended with healing turned into a new nightmare. You know what's wild? Despite everything, Cary Stayner was still described by many as one of the nicest people you could meet. Calm, unbothered, polite, the kind of guy who smiles through traffic and helps you carry your groceries. No anger issues, no temper. But beneath that chill exterior, something was rotting. By the time Steven came back home, Cary was 18, basically a grown man. Probably had accepted deep down that he'd never see his brother again. And then, boom, Steven returns, the miracle kid. And just like that, Carrie was pushed back into the shadows. Again. Of course, Carrie was happy to have his brother home. He had wished on stars for years, literally. But now that Steven was back, the spotlight was brighter than ever, and it was on someone else. Neighbors would later say that after Steven returned, it was like Carrie disappeared again. Michael Coleman, who lived next to the Stayners for 2 decades, said, "When Steven came home, Carrie was put back on the shelf." Victoria Flores, another longtime neighbor, said, "Carrie was very frustrated. He wanted as much attention as Steven got." Well, Victoria wasn't wrong. And then Steven died. That motorcycle accident in '89 shattered what little normalcy was left. Steven's death only cemented his hero status. There were TV movies, books, statues, memorials, national headlines. But for Carrie, it was like losing his brother twice. And maybe that's why he moved in with his uncle Jesse in 1990. Maybe he just wanted a clean slate, a father figure, something stable. But even that ended in death. Jesse Stayner was found murdered in his own home, 1 gunshot wound. No one was ever arrested. And when the newspaper reported the murder, the headline didn't say Jesse Stayner killed. No, it read, "Uncle of Steven Stayner murdered." Carrie's name, nowhere. He was invisible again, even in tragedy. Carrie bounced around odd jobs. He became a glazier, cutting and installing glass windows. At one job, his coworker Mike Mayers found him punching a piece of plywood over and over until his fists bled. When asked what the hell he was doing, Carrie said he was having a nervous breakdown. He even confessed that he wanted to show up at work and kill everyone there before setting the place on fire. Red flag, anyone? Eventually, Carrie took a job as a handyman at the Cedar Lodge in El Portal, right near Yosemite National Park, surrounded by mountains, rivers, and serene wilderness. It was the perfect place to disappear into peace or madness. Carrie would sunbathe naked, smoke a little weed, stare at the sky. Sounds harmless, right? Until 1999. That year, Carol Sund, her teenage daughter Julie, and Julie's friend Silvina Peloso went missing. They had been staying at Cedar Lodge, and so began one of the largest search efforts in Yosemite's history. Weeks later, their rental car was found at the bottom of a cliff, burned to ashes. 2 bodies were inside, but Julie, still missing. Then the FBI received something terrifying, a crudely drawn map and a note that read, "We had fun with this one." Soon after, Julie's body was discovered, 40 miles from the burned car. Her body had been dumped in the woods, her life stolen, her family shattered. And investigators? Well, they focused on 2 ex-cons, Michael Larwick and Eugene Dykes. Honestly, these guys looked like walking mugshots. Larwick had a rap sheet that included drugs, assaults, even possession of a rocket launcher. Yeah, a literal rocket launcher. So yeah, they were solid suspects, except they didn't do it. Larwick even said, "I ain't got nothing to do with this. I've done a lot of things. I'm no angel. But you got the wrong guy." And guess what? He was right. Because 5 months later, in July 1999, another woman went missing. Her name was Joey Armstrong, a 26-year-old naturalist who lived and worked at Yosemite. When she didn't show up for a planned trip, police searched her cabin, and what they found was horrifying. Signs of a struggle, blood, a trail. Joy's body was found half a mile away. She had been decapitated. Her head was found floating in a nearby stream. This time, the evidence was stronger. Carrie Stayner's distinctive vehicle had been seen in the area. He was brought in for questioning, not as a suspect, but as a potential witness. So, when the FBI finally caught up with Carrie Stayner, at a nudist colony no less, he didn't run, didn't even flinch. He just calmly raised both arms above his head like, "Yep, it's me, the naked murderer. Take your pictures." Now, you'd think this would scream, "Suspect." Zrania. He wasn't treated like one, not at first. During questioning, they literally shared a pizza, yes, a pizza, while he started spilling secrets like a drunk uncle at Thanksgiving. And just like that, he confessed. Joey Armstrong, Carol Sund, Julie Sund, Silvina Peloso, all of them, gone because of him. FBI agent Jeff Rinnick, who wrote a whole book about this called In the Name of the Children, said Carey made some truly horrifying requests during his confession. Oh, he didn't just come clean, number he negotiated. He wanted 3 things: his family to get the reward money, to be placed in a federal prison close to his loved ones, and images of little girls. Disgusted yet? Yeah, me too. When asked to choose one thing, just one, he picked the images over his family, over location, over decency, over humanity. That's the monster we're talking about. And of course, after being denied, he still confessed. Maybe because Agent Rinnick convinced him it would bring catharsis. Or maybe, just maybe, he wanted the spotlight back. That same spotlight he lost to Steven decades ago. Carey claimed his homicidal urges started at age 6. 6. He was 37 when arrested. That's 3 decades of harboring darkness, 3 decades of faking normalcy. But when it finally unraveled, it wasn't just about trauma, it was about legacy. Because the Stayner family, they were drowning in generational pain. Steven's kidnapping was just one chapter. Carey and Steven's own father, Delbert, had a history of abuse. Carey himself reportedly assaulted his younger sister. And if that wasn't enough, he too was assaulted by his own uncle, Jesse Stayner, who was later killed, prompting a reopened case. So yes, Steven's abduction was horrifying, but Carey's spiral came from a much deeper rot. Here's the terrifying truth. Carey appeared normal, quiet, talented even. He was voted most creative in high school. He played baseball. He was the kind of guy you'd never suspect. But behind closed doors, he was drowning in silence, in shadows, in fury. And while Steven's pain made him a hero, Carey's pain turned into something else, something twisted. Steven lived through hell and still managed to save another boy. He got married. He had kids. He tried. Carey? He sank. So maybe, just maybe, this story isn't about good versus evil. Maybe it's about who gets seen and who gets ignored. Because Steven was the missing child who returned a hero. And Carey was the child who watched his family collapse around him and no one ever looked back. But here's the final twist that stings. Steven, the boy who saved a life, died in a tragic motorcycle accident at just 24. Carey, the man who took 4 lives, still breathes on death row. Sometimes the universe gets it backwards.